but that's okay. We'll go ahead and get started.
It works for me.
All right, so my name is Krystal Hosmer from Robco Electric, and this class is not about buying solar from Robco. It's about buying solar in general, understanding what it is, how it works with the power grid, how the tax credit works, the different kinds of technology, the different kind of financing and payment plans, and how to vet a good contractor. Your instinct that the door knockers maybe aren't the right ones is pretty solid. So I'm going to teach you how to find a good one. And whether that's us or not, again, that's not what the class is about. It's about making you a better shopper. So why do people want to go solar? The biggest one is to save money. You have to buy power no matter what. Over 25 years, a correctly priced solar system, and there can be a massive amount of variation in the prices, a correctly priced solar system should cost less than half for the same amount of power. Got to buy it anyway. Why wouldn't you pay less than half? It is clean. The panels, as you are well aware, make no noise. They don't require very much maintenance, and they just sit up there and do their thing. You're also reducing pollution and helping to preserve water quality because you're not putting nasty stuff into the environment. There's some independence and some cost control. Although you are truly not cutting the cord with the grid, you're not nearly as dependent on what NV Energy may or may not decide to do with rates. And obviously, if you purchase the system outright, you are definitely controlling your costs. It's a one-time thing, you're done. There is a large federal income tax credit for going solar, and we're going to talk more specifically about what the credit is and how it works. The other big reason to think about solar is it's an added resale value. You're putting a power plant on your roof. Everybody has to buy power. It's not like a swimming pool that's kind of subjective, where some people like to swim and some people don't. Everyone has to buy electricity. So a fully paid for solar system can allow you to recover as much as $2,000 per kilowatt at resale. So if you've got a 6 kilowatt system, you could add 12 grand in resale value to the house. So what does rooftop solar look like? A little bit different than the utility scale that you're used to. We pride ourselves on doing particularly neat installs where there's not a bunch of electrical conduit going over the roof, not a lot of equipment on the wall. What equipment we do have to put on the wall, we're very careful about placement, and we paint everything. You can also see in this picture the solid metal flashing that we include with every installation to keep the birds out. Not everybody does, and that's one of the important things if you're thinking about getting it on your house that you really need to make sure is included, is some kind of pigeon proofing. So these are just some examples of some of our installs. Here's some of the electrical for one of our projects. And you can see what I was talking about with that, how everything is just nice and neat and tidy. This is one on a swimming pool. Right up here, it's a little hard to see in this picture, but if we have to leave a gap for a vent like it is here, you can see that the flashing is inside the gap as well. We don't leave anything to chance with the birds. And this is a pretty expensive house over in Southern Highlands. This was quite a fun install. This is a small one in the lakes. And you can see that even if it has to go in the front of the house for production, it doesn't have to look terrible. You can be careful and thoughtful about it. So once you get solar, the biggest thing that people want to know about is, how does the power company pay me for electricity? The power company calls this net metering, and it works like rollover minutes used to work on cell phones. So when the sun is out, the panels are making DC current, the high voltage stuff. Your house needs AC current, the lower voltage stuff. So that electricity passes through an inverter, and the inverter does exactly what the name sounds like. It's flipping the current from DC to AC. Once those clean kilowatt hours are in your house, your dishwasher, your microwave, your air conditioner, they don't care where those kilowatt hours came from, and they don't act any differently. living in a solar home is exactly like living in your house now. It just costs less. There's going to be days like yesterday. It was really clear and sunny. It was a little warm, but not quite warm enough for everybody to turn on their air conditioners. On a day like that, your system's going to make a lot of electricity that maybe you're not going to use. When that happens, the extra power is fed back through your power meter, and NV Energy puts a credit on your bill. Now, that electricity doesn't go like off in some big storage tank or into the sky. Electricity has to be used as soon as it's created. So that power goes directly to your neighbors. Whichever building nearest you needs electricity, get your clean solar kilowatt hour. NV Energy sells it to them at full retail price. Now, they don't just take your power and run off and laugh. They pay you for it. You get 75% of the retail price of every one of those kilowatt hours as a credit on your bill. Just like the rollover minutes would stay on your bill until you needed them, and you didn't have to call up the cell phone company and say, hey, my wife and her sister were planning that baby shower and they talked up a storm. Please apply my rollover minutes and don't whack me with those overages. The same thing happens with the power company. If you use more than your excess, they just will apply your rollover minutes automatically. You don't have to call them and ask. This deal with you and the power company doesn't matter how you got solar, whether you own it, whether you lease it, who installed it. This is the same deal for everybody. Net metering is tied to the address, not to the customer. So if you sell your home within that 20-year time frame, the new owner will assume the remainder of your net metering agreement. They don't get your kilowatt hours accumulated, your rollover minutes. When you sell the house, those get zeroed out. I guess that's kind of NV Energy's revenge. They get to keep your extra kilowatt hours, but the new owner does get your net metering agreement. This is an after solar bill, and it kind of gives you an idea how this works. So at the end of the month, kilowatt hours delivered, KWHD, is how much power the power company sent to the house. This particular bill is from May, June of 2018. So this bill's about 3 years old, but it's pretty typical for a solar customer. This house used 763 kilowatt hours. Now, obviously, it's getting hot about this time of year. Those air conditioners are kicking on. So this is some nighttime power use for air conditioner. Kilowatt hours received, this is how much electricity you over-generated and sent back to the power company in that particular month. For these guys, it was 1,108. What you send back wipes out what you use, even Steven, 1 for 1. So they sent back 1,108. That completely wiped out the 783 that they used. This next line, kilowatt hours accumulated, these are the true rollover minutes. They had a surplus of 325. 1,108 minus 783 is 325. That was their surplus for the month. This is what NV Energy pays you for on any given month. It's whatever is on this kilowatt hours accumulated line. This last line, kilowatt hours net, that is the net in net metering. In this particular month, they sent back more than they used, and they had a surplus. So NV Energy billed them for exactly 0 kilowatt hours. The net was 0. And you can see that their power bill was $13.67, not 0. You still have to pay your basic connection charge of $12.50. And there's some taxes and fees, some of which can be wiped out with solar and some of which can't. Some people say, well, I want to go off the grid completely. No, you really don't. If you want to go off the grid completely, that means you have to make all of the energy you need at night too, which means batteries. Batteries are really expensive right now. Net metering doesn't cost you any more than the basic connection charge. And you know, as solar customers, you still use the grid. That's who's giving you electricity at night. So it's reasonably fair to pay for the poles and the wires to make sure that, when the dog barks at 3 o'clock in the morning and you want to get up and get a drink, that you turn the lights on. So that's pretty reasonable and fair. Up here at the top, this is how the money flows. At the beginning of this billing cycle, all through the fall, winter, and spring, they had made credits. So they had $153.64 of credit sitting on the bill. This month, this 325 kilowatt hours that were purchased back for them was worth $32.90 credit. That got added to the bank. The power company applied $2.84 credit. Some of these taxes and fees down here can be wiped out with solar, and some of them can't. And they just automatically apply whatever they can. Oh, there's somebody waiting to get in. So we'll just wait a second here while Tom joins us. Hi, Tom, can you hear us? I don't think he's got his mic on yet. Tom, can you hear us? There you go. We can hear you. You didn't miss too much. We just got started. So at the end of the month, they had $183.70 credit on their account. So like I said earlier, this here bill is for really early summer. So what's coming in July, June, July, and August? The heat. These credits that are on your bill pay for your higher demand in the summer. Just like the cell phone companies, again, would apply your rollover minutes, the power company is going to take that winter credit bank and use it to pay for the high summer demand. If the system sized correctly, you're going to make extra electricity through the fall, winter, and spring, build up a bank of credits. When the summer comes, the credit pays for the higher demand. Over the whole course of the year, a correctly sized system is going to have an after solar bill of about $14, $18 a month, which I'm sure a lot of people would love to trade their August bill for $18 a month. All right, does anybody have any questions on net metering before we move on? Let me just unmute you guys here. There we go. Stephen, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, looks like we lost Tom, so we'll give him a second and see if he can rejoin us. With net metering, Nevada has a tiered structure. Some of the systems that were installed before 2015 are in grandfathered net metering. That means they get full credit, 1-for-1, 100% buyback. Systems installed after 2015 are on the net metered 405 tiered rate. You can see that up here. It says net metered 405 on the bill. This particular system is in tier 1. So they get 95% of the retail value of the power that they sell back. Right now, the state's in tier 4. So the buyback percentage in tier 4 is 75%. This is the last tier, and it has no capacity limit. So unless the legislature makes a change, everybody from here on out gets the 75% buyback. All right. So the next thing to understand is, how does a solar company size your system? It's not just a random thing. We don't go, ooh, that looks like a really expensive house. I'm putting 80 panels on there because it's going to give me a great big commission. That's not how it works. Solar's got to be sized so that the supply, the power coming down from the roof, meets the demand. How much electricity does the house need? We can do that in one of two ways. We can either use historical consumption, the last 12 months of power use in the house, or we can size based on the livable square footage. Why do we want it to be in balance? If the system's too small, we don't put enough solar on the roof to make the amount of power that you need, well, the rest of the power has to come from somewhere. You're going to be buying those kilowatt hours at full price from NV Energy. So undersizing a system can make a customer kind of upset. They're expecting a $14.50 $15 a month after solar bill and a $100 a month after solar bill, that system's too small. They're going to be quite angry that we didn't do our job right. On the flip side, an oversized system making far more electricity than the house needs builds up a bunch of those buyback credits. Nobody ever gets rich selling power to the power company. So if you have a gigantic bank of credits, $500, $600, $800, you can't just call NV Energy up and say, hey, cut me a check for that. They never, ever turn those buyback credits back into cash. It's just a big credit on your bill. So you want to balance the system. How much power do you need with how much power you're making on the roof? A little bit of a cushion, it's not a bad thing, a couple hundred kilowatt hours a year, but thousands of extras, buying an extra 5 or 10 panels, even if you have the money, that's just you wasting your money. You're giving free power to the power company. You have any questions on sizing?
No.
Okay. Now, one of the questions people ask is, hey, I'm going to get an electric car, or I'm buying a swimming pool. Isn't that going to make me use more power? Yes, it absolutely will. If you're going to do something like that, you know you're going to do it, we can size for those things. We have to have an electrical engineer justify that extra demand. And that's not that NV Energy is being horrible. What NV Energy is doing is protecting you from an unscrupulous solar company that's oversizing the system. They're selling you too many panels. That's why there's this extra step where an electrical engineer has to say, yes, they are getting a swimming pool. It has two pumps that are half horsepower. They're going to run this many hours a day, and that's going to cause this house to use an extra 3,000 kilowatt hours a year. Or this customer just ordered an electric car. They're going to drive it this many miles a day. That's going to result in a charging load of this much a year. So we can definitely size for things like that if it's an immediate thing, you know you're going to do it. Now, what if you're like, maybe 4 years from now we'll get a swimming pool, or maybe I'll get an electric car from 2 years from now. We can't size for that stuff because it's not definite, but you can definitely add panels later. People's lives change and how much power they need changes over time. For instance, on my own home, I purchased this home from an existing Robco customer. She was a single lady that lived in this house by herself. I have my mother living with me and my adult child. We needed more power than she did. So when I bought the home, I added panels. I added an extra 8 panels to the house. I also have an electric car. So again, I needed more power. So my panel could handle it. So I just added on. You don't have to ask NV Energy's permission once the system is up and running if you have a higher demand. But you still have to be mindful. You don't want to just put a whole crap load of panels on the roof because, again, you need to burn the power you're making, or those credits just sit there indefinitely and you can never cash them out. All right, next thing to talk about is the solar tax credit. Whoever owns the panels gets the tax credit. So if you lease the system, what's called third-party ownership, Sunrun or Vivint or Sonova or somebody else owns the panels and you're simply buying the electricity, you don't own them, you don't get the tax credit, they do. If you purchase the system, you pay cash, you finance it, you use a HELOC, however it is that you get the money, then you get the tax credit. The tax credit is really valuable. This is the largest non-income limited tax credit you can get. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, you can claim the entire value of the tax credit. The tax credit is 26% of the purchase price on the system. So it's going to pay for quite a bit of the system. This is not a tax deduction, it's credit. That means for every dollar you have in tax credit, you owe the IRS $1 less in income taxes. The credit is currently 26%. It's scheduled to stay at 26% until 2022, or is it 2023? They extended it in December of 2020 for 2 years. I think it's 2023. The way the credit works, if you do not use the entire credit in the first year, you can carry the balance over to subsequent years, but they won't add to your refund. In this example, these folks owed $6,549 in income taxes. Through withholding, either from their paycheck or their pension or however it is they set the money aside, they'd set aside $7,647 to pay their taxes. In a normal year, they owed $65.49, paid in $76.47, so they're getting a refund of about $1,100. Here's how the tax credit would change that situation. For this system, it was a fairly large system, so the credit was $8,378. The credit is bigger than their liability. That means it wipes it out completely. They now owe $0 in income taxes, so the IRS gives them back all of their withholding. All $7,647 would come back as a refund. The balance of the credit, $1,829, would roll over to the next tax year. So for these folks in 2022, they would pay $1,829 less in income taxes. Hold on just a second. Mom, I'm teaching class. Go. Do you have any questions about the tax credit, Stephen?
I do not, but whoever thought you'd be teaching a class and go, Mom, not right now.
My mother just woke up and came down the hall. Yeah, the life of the Zoom people. Every once in a while, the cat comes and wanders through class. Yeah, I think we're all used to it by now.
I had to work through the whole thing, so never had it from our side, but we got to watch everything.
Oh, yeah. All right. Another common question about solar is homeowners associations. Can they say no? The answer is nope. Nevada has a solar rights law. Your ability to go solar is guaranteed. Your HOA cannot say no. The only circumstance where an HOA could bar you from getting solar is if you live in a condo or a townhome community where they actually own the roof. You can't put solar on something you don't own. As long as you do own the roof, your HOA also cannot place unreasonable restrictions on your solar. So if the front of your house faces due south, that's the best place to put the panels, but it also faces the street. They can't come along and go, we don't like the way that looks. You have to put them on the back of your house. That would reduce your system production by more than 10%. And that is an unreasonable restriction according to the law. So they kind of have to pound sand. Most solar contractors will try and take care of your HOA application for you. Increasingly, the HOAs are not allowing contractors to put in applications. So a lot of companies, including ours, have had to make the less than fortunate decision that we have to ask the homeowners to submit because the HOAs just won't allow us to submit anymore. But you do have to get approval from your HOA. You're going to have to turn in an architectural review committee form like the one that you would need for a swimming pool or something like that. So the next thing to understand is the differences in panels. So there are two types of solar panels. There's a bunch of different brands, but they all come down to these two basic types. Monocrystalline panels, the ones that look black on the roof, are made out of a single silicon crystal cell. These kind of panels have higher energy conversion efficiencies. They're going to be over 19%. Somewhere between 19 and 22% is the most efficient one in the world. You can think of these kind of like plywood. They're stronger, they're more uniform, they last longer. These guys have a higher quality construction. The frames are stronger, the glass is stronger. They also have a lower degradation rate. Degradation is something that all solar panels do. Over time, when they hit 20, 25, 30 years old, you will start to notice that they produce a little tiny bit less electricity than they did when they were brand new. That's the quality of the silicone. It doesn't have anything to do with, is it bad? It's just the way that material works. The manufacturers have a window of degradation that's allowed, and all the reputable manufacturers guarantee that the panels are going to stay within that window. If they degrade faster than what the window is, then the manufacturer is going to take care of that under warranty. That's called a power output warranty. These kind of panels perform well in high heat, which is really important here in Southern Nevada. They typically have longer warranties, but most importantly, you get more lifetime power using fewer panels because they're more efficient. So if you're buying panels, you're buying the system where you're paying per panel, getting the monocrystalline is going to be the best value for your money. You're going to need fewer panels to do the same job. Solar panels should cost about $1,000 each installed on a residential home. So if it's a difference between 22 panels and 20, that's a $2,000 savings. So you want to go with a slightly better technology. The other kind of panels are polycrystalline. These are a little bit more like particle board. And I know that this is not the best quality image, but if you kind of zoom in on this, you can see that the surface of these panels look like particle board. Polycrystalline means many. This is a composite material. And just like particle board is not as strong as plywood and doesn't last as long as plywood, the same thing is true of polycrystalline panels versus mono. These have a lower energy conversion efficiency, somewhere between 14 and 18%. The leasing companies love these because they're cheaper. And when you're leasing a system, you're not buying per panel. It doesn't matter to you one bit if you have 20 or 22 panels on your roof. The leasing company is going to put up whatever equipment is the cheapest to make the amount of energy they promised. They don't perform as well in high heat. The warranties aren't as good. And again, you're going to need more of them to do the same job. So whatever brand you end up with, monocrystalline, the black ones, that's the kind you want. So the next piece of the technology to understand is the inverter. I mentioned that earlier. It's the thing that is flipping the current from DC to AC. Inverters come in two varieties. There's a central inverter, and that is exactly what the name sounds like. There's one inverter, so all the electricity comes down from the roof, goes into that central inverter, and then goes into your main electric panel. Just like you might be thinking, that's one single point of failure. If the inverter dies on a residential system, the whole system goes down, or half the system goes down if you have more than one inverter. The other kind of technology is called microinverters. Microinverters are wired in parallel. That means if one inverter or one panel has a problem, the rest of the system just keeps making power. So there's a lot of redundancy built into the systems with micros. Micros also have no moving parts inside. As we're all well aware, things that move over time are more likely to break. The parts wear out and they break. Because micros have no moving parts, they last longer, 25 years, and they're warranted for a full 25 years. Micros are also hot swappable. If something does go wrong, see this little trunk cable right here? To swap out a micro, you just unplug that cable, plug in a new micro, swap the serial number, make sure it's working, and head off. It takes about 45 seconds to swap a micro. To swap a bad central inverter can take 6 to 8 hours in a residential setting, and then the guy has to come back a couple weeks later and do stucco patch and paint around it. So the last kind is kind of a kludge. When micros first came out, the makers of central inverters really liked some of the qualities of micros. They liked that you could have independent panel level monitoring. You could see what every panel was doing. The other thing they really liked about micros was micros handle shade much better. In a traditional solar system with a central inverter, if there's shade here on this one panel, because the panels are wired in series, every panel on the string, and in a residential setup, it's usually 8, 12, or 16 panels on a string, everything that's on the string acts like a unit. So if there's shade here on this panel with a standard central inverter system, all the panels on the string act like they're in shade, so your production drops. Microinverters, on the other hand, because they're wired in parallel, if there's shade on this panel's production will drop, but everybody else in the system just keep on kicking out juice. So the central inverter makers were like, oh, we really like that. So how can we kind of get some of those functionality? They came up with these guys, optimizers. Optimizers are little devices that go underneath the panels, and they provide that panel level monitoring that the micros do. They also levelize out the production drop if there's shade. So instead of the whole string dropping to 50%, the whole string might drop to 90%. You still get some performance loss with shade, but it's not as bad with optimizers. The important thing to remember, though, is optimizers are not inverters. So if the central inverter dies, that big mechanical cooling fan in the central inverter gives up the ghost and dies, your system still goes completely down. It still has a central point of failure. So micros give you no performance loss. They handle shade much better. They also handle waking up earlier because they require less voltage. So when the sun comes up, they click on earlier. They also click off a little bit later. There is no single point of failure. So you have redundancy in the system. And because there's no moving parts inside of them, they're more reliable and they last longer. So again, if you're purchasing the system, this type of setup is going to be less maintenance and less downtime and more power production over the whole course of the year. Do you have any questions about inverters before we move on?
No.
Okay. So there's a couple of different ways to pay for solar. The cheapest and fastest and easiest way is to just pay cash. There's no interest, there's no fees, no finance fees. There's no agreement that has to be assumed by a future owner. There's no annual escalator in the cost for electricity. Everything is simple and easy. It's a fixture, gets sold with the house, adds some resale value, the warranties transfer, monitoring transfers, very cut and dry. If you don't have the cash on hand, you could use your home's equity. There's a really big benefit to using home equity. You're going to get a lower finance fee and a better interest rate if you use your home's equity because the value of, the asset that's securing that loan is your house. The house is worth more than the solar system. So you tend to get better rate using home equity than using a standalone solar loan. Also, if you can still use the mortgage interest tax deduction, not everybody can, but if that's you, the interest paid on any kind of home equity loan, whether it's a HELOC, a cash out refi, or a true second mortgage, that would be tax deductible because that interest is tied to a loan secured by your house rather than solar. If you don't want to use home equity, most solar companies partner with a lender to offer unsecured solar loans. These are pretty easy to get these days, but like any loan, you should definitely shop around. The loans have different terms, they have different finance fees. Some of them have no prepayment penalty, some of them do. So you should definitely take your time to understand how the loan works. The other option is to lease the panel. The solar company owns the panels and sells you the power every month. You're not going to pay any cost to install. All those ads you see on Facebook for zero down solar, this is what they're talking about, or zero cost solar. There is no such thing as a free lunch. What they mean is they're not going to charge you to install the system because you're not purchasing the equipment, but they're definitely going to turn around and charge you for power. Now, there can be a lot of issues with these kinds of agreements when the house is sold. The agreements have to be assumed. You usually cannot take the panels off the house or take them with you. Technically, you can, but the cost to do it is insane. You also cannot break these leases early. Whatever the door-to-door idiot tells you, these leases are written very strongly in favor of the solar company, and breaking them is incredibly expensive. The penalties are vicious. It's usually 95% of the remaining payments due on the lease, plus court costs and penalty fees. And you actually spend more than if you just left the thing on the house. So with leasing, as I said, it's a zero out-of-pocket cost. Here is another point where they tend to really cause problems. NV Energy currently charges 10.2 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. Most of the leases have a starting price per kilowatt hour higher than that 10.2 cents. And most of them have some sort of annual escalator. It's usually somewhere between 1 and 3% every single year. Doesn't matter what power company's doing, the charge you pay goes up every single year. So if you get a lease that, say, starts at 11 cents a kilowatt hour, every year it's going to go up. Now, the reason I mentioned specifically what NB Energy charges is everybody thinks that the power company charges incredibly more here than they actually do. Everybody thinks it's 15, 16, 18 cents a kilowatt hour, especially if they came from California where that's what they do charge, but it's not. It's 10.2 cents. The other thing that everybody thinks is that the power company's rates are going up like a rocket ride. Every single year they go up. That's not true. In the last 6 years since 2015, NB Energy's prices have gone down every single year. In 2015, they charged 13.4 cents. Today it's 10.2. So if you get a lease that has an annual escalator, if that trend continues, very quickly, you will pay more for solar than you do for power from the power company. This is one of those things that can really trip up a resale. If a buyer comes in and figures out that that solar actually costs more than just having electricity from the electric company, why would they buy your house? Why would they agree to take over that lease and be locked in? So that's where that can cause big problems. Most appraisers will not give added resale value to a leased system because it's not an asset, it's a debt. You've got to pay that payment every single month. And as I mentioned earlier, there can be substantial early termination fees if the buyer just is refusing to assume that lease. So it can absolutely stop a sale. With buying the panels, though, all those complications disappear. There we go. You get the full federal tax credit. The cost of the system is set at purchase. There's no annual increase of any kind. The warranty is complete and completely transferable. So you get the benefit of the warranty, and so do all future owners, whatever's left on the manufacturer's warranty. There is increased resale value because this is now a money-saving asset, not a debt that has to be paid every month. There's no hassle with transfer. It's just like selling a house with a swimming pool. It goes straight with the house. You get to control what kind of panel and inverters you get. When you lease a system, they get to control that. The system can physically be moved anywhere you move. You do own those panels and inverters, but it's not free to take a solar system off the roof. So sometimes that just doesn't make sense financially. Obviously, there are no early termination fees because there's no agreement. You paid for it. And there's lots of financing options available. In general, the only time a lease or a PPA, that's a variant of a lease, it's called a power purchase agreement, might be a better fit is if you have no tax liability, all your income comes from Social Security or say SSI disability or something like that. In that particular situation, if you can find a fixed rate lease that starts at 9 cents a kilowatt hour and stays that way forever, there's no escalator. In that particular situation, a lease might be a better fit. You just don't have the capital to pay for solar and you don't have the tax liability to take advantage of the tax credit. Any questions on the difference between leasing and buying?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So if you are going to finance the system, as I mentioned earlier, understanding how those loans work is really important. This offer here in the middle, 0% for 84 months. God, that sounds good. You're going to give me $25,000, $30,000 for 9 years at no interest? Sign me up. That sounds great. Well, look at that from the bank's point of view. Is that a good deal for the bank? I'm just going to loan you all that money for 9 years. I'm not going to charge any interest. Where's my profit? Banks are not charities. This particular loan, the finance fee is 24% of the contract price. Okay. So if you borrowed $20,000 under this particular program, your actual finance price would be $24,800. Some solar loans, if it is a longer term with a lower interest rate, the finance fee is going to be vicious. The 20-year 1.99 or 2.99 rates, there's even a 25-year at 0.99% rate that's being marketed these days. On that particular one, the finance fee is 35%. The solar companies won't tell you there's a finance fee. This is kind of like credit card fees. They're supposed to just wrap it into the price, and that's what they do. But how can you make a good purchasing decision if you don't understand the fees are there and you don't understand how to find them? So here's how to find the fee. If they've come and they said, okay, here's your solar, your purchase price is X, your monthly payment is Y, great deal, let's do that. Look at them and say, what's the cash price? You're going to hear a significant difference on the cash price. They're just doing the cash price and the finance price, that's the finance fee. So it's really important not to just focus on the cheapest monthly payment, but to focus on the total borrowing cost. So with these loans, you want to avoid a prepayment penalty, especially if it's a 12, 15, 20-year loan. The likelihood that you're going to be in your house for that long statistically is poor. Most people sell their house between 7 and 12 years. You want to be able to pay that loan off, because if a new buyer has to assume that debt or pay it off at, that's going to make it harder to sell your house. You also want to avoid these high upfront finance fees. And again, if there's a big gap between the cash discount price and the finance price, that's the finance fee. You also want to avoid very long loan terms. As I mentioned, the 15, 20, and 25-year terms, especially when they have a really low interest rate, are going to have a stupid high finance fee. Come on. One more thing about loans. The way these loans are typically set up, they are set up so that you're encouraged to put your tax credit back into the loan. So that 26%, that is the tax credit. Some of the loans are set up so that you have a low monthly payment to begin with, and in the first 12 or 18 months, you're expected and required to put the tax credit back into the loan, the full value of the tax credit, whether your tax situation allowed you to get that as a refund or not. On those types of loans, if you do not put the tax credit back into the loan, at the end of that 12 or 18 months, your monthly payment will go up. So that can be an unpleasant surprise, because we all know taxes are complicated. And if you just assume the IRS is going to send you a check for the full amount of your tax credit, which we already discussed, it doesn't work that way. And for whatever reason, you don't receive a refund big enough to pay that amount of the tax credit back into the loan, you can really trap yourself into a bad situation. There are loans that work the other way. You get the full 100% payment to begin with, and then you have the ability to pay the loan down in that first 18 months and drop your payment. Make sure that you ask which way the loan works. Is it low payment and jumps if you don't put the tax credit back in, or is it high payment and can go down if you put the tax credit back in? Depending on your financial situation, one or the other might be a better option for you. Okay, so what should solar cost? If you go and get 5 solar bids on your house, you are going to get 5 wildly different prices. How do you know who's got a fair price? So you want to kind of look at the equipment. Are you comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges? Is the system, are they both monocrystalline panels, or is one mono and one poly? What kind of inverters is it? Are they both central inverters? Are they both centrals with optimizers? Are they both micros? Or is there some sort of difference? The other thing you want to look at is how many watts are in the panels. So if it's a 300 watt panel for bid A and a 380 watt panel on bid B, that's not apples to apples. That's a little bit different. The last thing you want to look at is the size of the system. 6 kilowatts, 8 kilowatts, 10 kilowatts, are they similar? A 6 kilowatt system is clearly going to cost a different price than a 10 kilowatt system. So you need to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. If they are pretty similar, this number is really, really valuable. If you're paying cash for a system here in Las Vegas, with the exclusion of Tesla, who sells solar cheaper than anyone else in the United States, the average cost per watt installed, the permit, the labor, the materials, the racking, the clips, the clamps, the labor, the profit, the commission, the overhead, all of it, the all-in price should be about $2.90 per watt. To get the cost per watt, you take the cost of the system before the federal income tax credit and divide it by how many watts are in the system. If it is a 6 kilowatt system, it has 6,000 watts in it, a kilowatt, 1,000 watts. When you do that math, you come up with the cost per watt. This is like the price for a gallon of gas. When your car's really low and heading for empty, you look for who has the cheapest cost per gallon. You're not going to buy 1 gallon of gas, but that gives you an idea how much is it going to cost to fill the tank. That's what this number is for solar. So if you're paying cash, again, the cost per watt should come up about $2.90. Now, of course, that's an average. There's a range. So here, again, with the exclusion of Tesla, you should be seeing prices somewhere between about $250 and about $320 a watt for cash. You're only going to see $320 a watt on tiny systems, like 8 or 10 panels. If it's an average size system, you're going to be somewhere in that $270, $290 range. An average size here in Nevada is about 25 panels. If you see a cost per watt way over this $320, say it's $350, $380, $4 a watt, kick those people out of your house. That system is massively overpriced for this market. If you see a price that's really low, down in that $2 a watt range that Tesla sells at, when you cut corners on prices, something suffers. I would strongly recommend that you read the reviews of any company offering solar at $2 a watt. That's lower than the cost of the materials and the labor. Something has to give there. It's usually customer service. The next number that you want to look at when you're comparing systems is the kilowatt hours per year. What is the output of the system? Now, remember, we want to be in balance. We want to produce as much power as we need with a tiny cushion, but we don't want to way overproduce or way underproduce. So when you're getting bids, one of the best things that you can do to begin with is pull out your own NV energy bill. There's a bar graph on the right-hand side. Add up all those numbers for the last 12 months. That's going to give you your annual use total. If you need 14,000 kilowatt hours, the system that produces the closest to 14,000, that's the best match for you. So if somebody says, I'm going to give you a system that creates 10,000 kilowatt hours, you know you need 14, that system's undersized. So if both of them are similar or all three of them are similar, the one that produces the most within what you need is going to be the best value for you. The last number that you can kind of look at is the payback time. There are a lot of different ways to calculate payback, but the very simplest one is how many years worth of power at today's price are you spending to pay for the system and the 25 years worth of power you're going to get out of it. To figure that out, you take how many kilowatt hours the system makes every year and times it by 10.2 cents. That's what it would cost you to buy that power from NV Energy. That's going to give you the annual cost of the power the system makes. That's the value it's creating for you. So if you take the cost of the system after the tax credit, the net cost, divide it by that annual cost of that electricity if you bought it from the power company, that'll tell you your payback time in years. Now, obviously, that is a simple payback. It does not take into account raising or lowering of NV Energy's fees, cost of money over time. What would happen if you invested that money in the stock market? It is just a straightforward, simple payback. When you do that math, here in Nevada, it should come up somewhere between 8 and 14 years. If the payback time is 16, 18, 20 years, that system is way overpriced. If the payback time is less than 8 years, something's wrong on the other end. The system's too cheap for the market. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This little bid compare worksheet that has that math on it is available on the Robco Electric website, and you can download it, and that'll help you kind of compare bids. So the next thing to understand is, how does the system get installed? You're buying panels and inverters and racking and clamps, but with solar, we're going to drill a lot of holes in your roof, about 200 in the average system. We're also going to be making changes to your main electric panel. We better know what the heck we're doing. We can cause a lot of problems if it's sloppily installed. The best equipment in the world installed by an inexperienced, sloppy crew can completely destroy your investment in solar and possibly cause some big problems to your house. So knowing how it's installed and that the crew who is doing it is experienced is really, really important. The thing that people really worry about solar is, what if my roof leaks after solar? And that's perfectly valid. I just told you we're going to drill 200 holes in your roof. We better make sure we seal those things up right. The state has addressed this concern. All contractors in Nevada that are licensed to install solar must provide a 10-year workmanship warranty that includes the roof penetrations. If there's a leak caused by the solar within the first 10 years after install, the contractor is responsible for it. So the state is forcing us to not be idiots and seal those penetrations up correctly. So this is how Robco goes about doing that. Most companies use a pretty similar installation process. This is Cocoa right here, and this is Connie. And you can see that Connie is levering up some tiles. So on a round tile or a flat tile roof, this is the basic process. The reason that we're levering up the tiles is we've got to get down to the rafters, to the underlayment under the tiles. So once we take the tile up, the first thing we do is we seal up the nail hole, because the tiles are held down with the nail hole. We don't want any open penetrations on the roof. The next thing that we do is we expose the underlayment here. Sometimes the underlayment's blue, sometimes it's white, sometimes it's black, sometimes it's called tar paper. Whatever it's called and whatever color it is, this is the waterproof layer that goes over the plywood that keeps water from getting into your roof. So we remove the dust and debris, and then we bang on the roof. We're listening for the sound of the rafters. The solar has to be anchored to your rafters. Why are we anchoring it to your rafters? High winds, solar in your neighbor's front yard, that's bad. We want your solar to stay put. So we've got to anchor it to the rafters. This thing right here is called a tile hook or a stanchion. You can see that it's got big holes here. These are for the lag bolts. This orange stuff that Carlos is putting on the bottom of this stanchion is called roofing mastic. This is the same thing that professional roofers use to seal up roof penetrations, sealed up around flashings. If you've got a leak on your roof and they come and seal it up, they probably used mastic to do it. This stuff is like super glue and bathtub caulk in the same tube. So it is a sealant and an adhesive. So once they put the mastic on the bottom of that tile hook, they set it down over the rafter, and then they sink 2 big lag bolts into the bottom of that tile hook. Sometimes it's 4. It kind of depends on the particular install. Now you can see that Carlos is drilling those lag bolts straight through that mastic, but that is not enough to correctly seal it. So this stuff comes out. This is called VersaFlash. Sometimes it's called mastic paper. Again, this is something that professional roofers use to seal up around flashing, seal up valleys, seal up any sort of roof patches. This stuff is like a metal mesh. It looks kind of like baby chicken wire. And this black stuff is a solid version of mastic. The hotter it gets, the stickier this stuff gets. So we cut a piece of this that is bigger than the bottom of that stanchion and set it down. And you can see that Carlos put a bunch of mastic on it before he set it down. We push on that mastic paper to kind of distribute that mastic underneath and make sure we're coating those lag bolts. Then we put a bunch of mastic around the edge and smooth it out so it creates a watertight seal. This thing sticking up, the tile hook, comes up above the tile. Depending on the racking system that's being used, Some installers need to notch or cut the tiles to work with the tile hooks. Some do not. The system that Robco uses, we do not need to notch or cut tiles. Why are those tile hooks there? That big hole on the top that we just saw is so these rails can be mounted. The panels sit on rails. They're not sitting loose on your roof, because what would happen when it got windy? They'd move around, make a bunch of noise, and annoy the crap out of you. So we put them up on rails. The other reason that they're put up on rails and clamped is because the panels, and in our case, the microinverters underneath them, need convection cooling. They need some airflow to dissipate heat. All electronics make heat, and this has got to be dissipated just like any other electronic. If it's a central inverter system, the central inverter has a mechanical cooling fan, and it's mounted to the side of the house. They always try and put it in the shade for the same reason that we are raising up the panels. The convection cooling helps keep the inverter cooler. So you can see right here where Sam's leaning over, right next to his foot here is this little kind of U-shaped clamp. That's the mid clamp. On the sides of the panel are little teeny tiny grooves. Those little flanges on the edge of that clamp go into those grooves. That's how the panels get secured to the rails. You can also see this zip tie right here. When we're bringing the panels up, we have to put grounding wire, this copper grounding wire. There's also some wiring that goes between the panels. Those get zip tied to the rails so that everything's out of the way and not making a bunch of noise. We don't want things loose on the roof. Once everything's set and grounded, some installers are done, and they just leave this kind of big gap here underneath the system. Well, not only does that not look as nice as it could, it is also a wonderful invitation for pigeons. Pigeons love to nest under solar panels. Even though it looks like it's a little tiny space for us, those little buggers are really flexible, and they feel very safe and protected from predators. So they think solar panels are the best place ever to nest. Not only are they noisy, but they poop. They poop a lot. The poop is really, really acidic. If the system's not pigeon proofed and they decide to move in, that acid in their waste can eat through that waterproofing underlayment, and then it can eat through the roof sheathing. So then not only do you have a hole in your roof, but it's a biohazard mess. Doing pigeon proofing cleanup after the fact, when you have to lift the panels up, shovel off many pounds of pigeon poop, feathers, dead birds, it's gross, really gross, and expensive. To do that can cost $3,000 or $4,000 to do that cleanup and then put in pigeon proofing after the fact. Robco is in the ounce of prevention is worth pounds and pounds of bird waste school. We just pigeon proof it install. It's not an optional thing with us because frankly, we don't want to clean up the mess. We don't want to put you through that trauma. So we use a solid metal flashing all the way around the arrays. Some companies use this kind of mesh net. It works as well. It's not as aesthetically nice looking. It also, because it's got little places where the bird beaks can grab, it's easier for them to pull it loose and defeat the purpose of having it there to begin with. So whichever kind of system you get, do not skip the pigeon proofing. Whether it's solid metal or it's mesh, get something because you don't want to be cleaning this nastiness up later. So what is the stuff on the side of the house going to look like? For a microinverter system, it's going to look a little bit different than a central inverter system. This picture is a microinverter. This right here is a combiner panel. This is where the modem is that talks to the internet that gives you monitoring. If this was a central inverter panel, this would be the central inverter. On both types of systems, you're going to have a disconnect switch. That's this thing right here. This is the emergency switch for firefighters. If there's a fire at your house, they need to be able to turn the solar system off before they spray water on your roof. Solar and electricity and water are just not a good combination. After your system is installed and is passed inspection, NV Energy will come and swap your meter. Your old one-way meter gets replaced by a new bidirectional meter. That is what gives you your kilowatt hours accumulated. That is how NV Energy pays you for power. If you turn the system on before the meter is swapped, they have no way of telling the difference between electricity you made and electricity you brought in from the street. So they will bill you for all the kilowatt hours your system made as if it is consumption. So although it is really hard to wait after installation because everybody wants to flip the switch immediately, you got to wait that 20, 25 working days for NV Energy to swap the meter, or you're going to just pay for all the power your system made. The last thing that's going to get installed is a brand new breaker is going to be installed for the solar energy coming from the roof to feed into your main panel. So it feeds in through its own circuit. There'll also be some conduit. Some companies are lazy and they don't paint it and they leave it all silver. Robco paints everything. It just looks nicer, and we insist that things look good. There can also be a difference in what the conduit looks like. Robco does attic penetrations. We're a licensed electrical contractor, not just a solar company. So our electricians know how to use Romex, which is flexible conduit that goes through the attic. We also know how to pull wires. So we go the extra mile to give you a really nice, neat install and hide that conduit. Not everybody does. This house is right across the street from my sister. And when they were installing the solar, the owner was in the driveway screaming at them because they thought it was perfectly fine to put conduit right down the front of her house. That's just lazy and sloppy. Not only has it got this ugly roof boot, but really right down the front of her house. Really? Now, had the crew been a little bit more mindful, they could have run a slightly bigger piece of conduit and used just this one roof boot, but no, they did too, and put it right down the front of her house. So ask, how does the contractor do conduit? What's my house going to look like after I get solar? The point of getting solar is to save you money, not to make your house look yuck. So the next thing to kind of think about is, who should you pick as a contractor? Getting that experienced crew that knows what they're doing is really, really important. You want guys, or ladies in some cases, that do this all day, every day, that know how to seal those penetrations up correctly. You want electricians that know how to work safely in a main panel. You don't want an electrical fire. So paying for experience is worth it. This thing's going to be on your house for 25 years. You don't want to have a bad experience with a sloppy install that just causes you problems all the time. So the first step is, are they licensed to install solar? In Nevada, you got to be licensed. You got to have a C2, that is a commercial electrical license. That's what Robco holds. Or you have to have a C2G. That is a specialty electrical license that is only for solar. So they can't do ceiling fans, they can't do outlets, they can only do solar. You can check a license with the Nevada State Contractors Board, and you should absolutely check the license. You're looking for two things on the license. Number one, what's the bid limit? The bid limit is a measure of financial responsibility. If they have a $10,000 bid limit and they're bidding to do your $50,000 solar install, if something goes wrong, they don't have enough wherewithal to cover the problem. They're also committing a crime if they're bidding over their bid limit. The other thing you want to check is, do they have any disciplinary action against their license? The Contractors Board is the contracting police. If they've done something that violates Nevada law as far as contracting is concerned, it will be recorded against their license. If you see disciplinary action, you should maybe try another company because they've done something, the board's caught them breaking the law. The next thing you do, assuming they have the right license, they've got the right bid limit, they don't have any disciplinary action, go read the reviews. If they do crappy installs, if they have bad customer service, if they don't own their mistakes, you can tell a lot about a company in the reviews. You cannot hide stuff like that, especially with Yelp, Google, Facebook, Nextdoor. There are so many places for customers to report. Did you have a good experience? Did you have a crappy experience? You got to read the reviews. The wisdom of the crowd is really smart. You're looking for a couple of things. You're looking for a lot of reviews. You want to know that these people know what they're doing and they do it a lot. You're also looking for what happened if something didn't go according to plan. Construction is the favorite playground of Murphy's Law. I'm sure that you've experienced that on your big projects. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. You want to know that the company's going to stand behind their work, they're going to own it, and they're going to do what they can to fix it. The reviews will tell you that. So look for that stuff. You also want to make sure that it's easy to find their contractor's license number. It should be on their website, their business cards, the folder, the proposal. That's Nevada law. If you have any trouble finding their license, that's a red flag. Something's not right. Maybe it's a reseller. Maybe they're not licensed. Maybe they're in trouble with the board. You want to be able to find their license easily. You also want to know how long have they been in business. You want somebody who's been around long enough to have a track record so that you can find out. Do they know what they're doing? Do they take care of people after the sale? You also want to kind of get an idea how many solar installs have they done in Las Vegas. Every utility and every permitting authority, so City of Henderson, City of Las Vegas, City of North Las Vegas, they all have different rules. So if they've done 5,000 installs in Phoenix, they know how Phoenix's permitting works. They know how APS's utility process works, but they don't know anything about NV Energy or how to get a permit here in Las Vegas. You really don't want them to learn on your house. What type of panels and inverters do they use? You want to make sure that you're getting quality equipment for your money. You want to know what kind of warranties are offered, both from the manufacturers of the equipment and the company itself. Remember, everybody has to offer a 10-year workmanship warranty. Some companies go above and beyond that and add some additional warranties, like a power production guarantee. Those things are good plans. Is pigeon proofing and monitoring included? Those things should be included for free, but sometimes they're extra charges, or sometimes they're not offered at all. Do they install their own systems, which means they're accountable for their own mistakes, or do they work through subcontractors? And then you get a bunch of finger pointing if something goes wrong. If there is a subcontractor involved, you're working with a sales organization of some kind, check the license on the people who are actually installing the system. Don't just assume because sales rep is very charming and the price is right that the subcontractor knows what they're doing. Check the license of the people who will be on your roof. You also want to ask whoever you're talking to, how do they waterproof the roof penetrations? If they cannot explain that to you, that means that they've never been to an install. They don't know how this happens. Why are they selling you solar? All right, last thing, how do you maintain this? There's no moving parts. You really don't have to do anything. If they are particularly dusty or dirty and you want to hose them off, it's perfectly fine to do that, but really just wait for the rain to show up. If you are going to wash them, do not use any soap, do not use any abrasives, just water. Just hose them off. If you really feel like they have to be washed and you cannot reach them, any solar company can clean them for you. There's usually going to be some sort of small fee. And when we clean them, we use microfiber cloths and distilled water. Again, no soap, no abrasives. If the solar company is saying, well, we'll give you a maintenance plan and we'll come and clean them every 6 months or a year, that's just them padding their bottom line. That's not necessary. You could never clean your system and it'd be just fine. So before we go, just a little bit about Robco so you can kind of judge the validity of the information that we've given you. Robco's been in business since 1997. We hold an unlimited C2 commercial electrical license with the state of Nevada. We have over 100 employees, give or take, depending on what's going on in the commercial electrical division. We have hundreds of repeat customers. Our biggest customer on an annual basis is Clark County School District. Anytime they're building, renovating, or rehabbing a school, a lot of times we're the commercial electrical contractor on those projects. We've sold and installed, I need to update this. We're up over 1,800 solar systems. Right now, we're counting down to a great big milestone. Our fleet is about to pass 100 gigawatt hours of total solar generation. Yesterday when I looked, we were at 96.2 gigawatt hours. The fleet right now is making about 500,000 kilowatt hours a week. So we think that we're going to pass that 100 gigawatt hours, 100 million kilowatt hours of clean power sometime in the next probably 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Robco is the highest rated locally owned installer on Yelp. We have lots of good reviews on Google, Nextdoor, Facebook. We stand behind our work and our reviews show that. We have never, ever had a single complaint filed against us with the contractors board. We also are very much education focused. We don't do the pushy sales tactics. We don't do the high pressure stuff. We explain solar, we explain the value, and then we just leave you alone to think about it. And when you're ready, you just give us a call. We also do not use day laborers. We do not use subcontractors. Everything about your system, if you choose to do solar with us, is going to be done by Robco employees. From sales to design to install to service after the fact, it's all W-2 accountable employees. If you have any more questions, you can call the office. Here's the phone number. My phone number is in chat. And that's all I have today. Any more questions?
So this is a 25-year system, and you're only guaranteeing penetrations for 10 years of that.
That is the state mandated workmanship warranty. Now, Robco, as I said, has been in business quite some time. If it was year 12 or year 13 and there was a problem, that doesn't mean we're going to tell you to go pound sand. What that means is we're going to come out and have a look at it. If it's something that we can just reasonably fix, and a lot of times it's 75 cents worth of mastic and a little bit of labor to fix it, we're just going to fix it. If it's something that is bigger than that, then on a case-by-case basis, we're going to look at it and try to come to some sort of resolution that's fair for you as a customer and us as a company. Remember I said earlier the Clark County School District is our biggest customer. We are not going to chance a fight over $1,000 worth of a roof repair, getting back to where Clark County School District thinks that we're unreliable or don't take care of people.
Do you guys pre-engineer the roof?
It is not required to pre-engineer the roof in
I didn't ask if it was pre-required, ma'am. I want to know if you engineer the roof, because that is my concern. I'm putting a lot of weight up there. I'm putting basically a wing up there for my 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And everything. And no, I'm just not selling the house in 12 years. I've already lived here for 18.
Yes,
So
we
I
do
look at a lifetime
full
endeavor here, and that's my overall big concern is the weight to power ratio, right? What's going to happen to my roof? And then what happens when I have to have the roof redone, which happens occasionally, and I have solar panels on it. And I'm assuming I'm responsible for all that, but theoretically it shouldn't be that difficult. It doesn't sound like, because they go together modular as a module, so that shouldn't make it that much more difficult to redo the roof.
Okay, so there's two questions in there. Yes, we provide a full set of engineering plans that's required for permitting. The panels weigh about 40 pounds each, and they exert about 6 pounds per square foot of force. The racking system is rated to withstand 125-mile-an-hour winds. And yes, we have to give the engineering letter to the permitting authority. So yes, we're responsible for making sure the weight is not more than the roof can bear.
Outstanding. Like I said, these are the questions nobody can answer for me at my door.
Right. The second question that was in there is what happens if you need to redo the roof? Taking a system off the roof involves a lot of labor. So if you have any concerns about the underlayment, any inkling that you might have a roof issue, you should definitely have that taken care of before you get solar. Let's say you do need to repair the roof, say 15 years later, the labor to remove a system for a roof replacement is not going to be covered. Installers.
Right, I would expect it to be.
Right. It will run about $5,000. It kind of depends on the size of the system. That's usually priced per panel. What that's called is a remove and replace. So we have to remove the system, store it safely on site. Your roofer does their thing. Then we have to reinstall it. It is quite a bit of labor. So yeah, you can expect about a $5,000 price tag depending on how big the system is.
That sounds about right. Now, for a panel replacement due to failure, whatever, Thunderbirds drop on it, everything, what do
Mhm.
you guys do with the old panels?
We recycle them.
Where?
We've got a company that we've contracted to do the recycling. That is a recent thing. Up until then, we would keep them in the yard, and occasionally, depending on whether or not the panel worked, we've resold quite a few used panels to folks who live up in Duck Creek and Cold Creek up on Mount Charleston, where it's off grid. They love used panels for their cabins. If the panel is actually just broken or destroyed, before we got this recycling company, we just keep it in the yard because we don't want those going to landfills. Now they go to recycling. And
Copper One, we replaced 1 million panels the first year because it was first generation.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a lot of waste.
Oh,
yeah,
it
we're
is.
we're
I mean,
pulling,
but they were learning. You know, for Copper
Yeah.
5, I think we're on the 8th generation panel for that company and doing much, much better. Because like Copper 4 will come online almost 5 minutes before Copper 1 now.
Yeah.
And that's just both the quality and their movable panels. That helps as well for their
It
style.
does.
But
Now, we don't do trackers on residential
I can't see how you
systems.
could do it on a resident.
And we don't.
It wouldn't be efficient.
Right. So they're going to be a fixed mounted flush tilt system, and it's going to follow the slope of the roof. We can do ground mount. We can also do flat roof systems where we use ballast to hold it down, big concrete blocks. Flat roof systems cost the same as a flush tilt system. The racking doesn't change the price. Those do absolutely require structural engineering. City of Las Vegas and county require structural engineering 100% on flat roof systems. Ground mounts, those are expensive. There is, as you can imagine, a significant more labor involved.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're building a structure. The cash price on a flush mounted system, like I said, is about $290. The cash price on a ground mount is going to be $400 to $450 a watt because of the extra labor involved in the trenching and concrete footings or ground screws. We can do them, but we prefer not to. In a residential setting, they're just mostly too expensive for people.
I would imagine. Of course, you go down racetrack and you got those square mile lots. They could do it because they're already rich. But
That's true. Now, I did just finish a large ground mount that I'm really proud of. So Mesquite's power company, Overton Power District number 5, that does Mesquite, Moapa, Overton, and I think Laughlin. That's a member-owned cooperative. And I worked with Randall Ozaki, who is their net metering renewable energy guy. And we applied for a grant with the U.S. Department of Agriculture for them to get $100,000. They spent that $100,000 for us to put 84 LG 415 watt bifacial solar panels connected directly to their Dinosaur substation in Mesquite. So the ground mount is inside the substation and it's on and making juice. And we are waiting. We just did another application. And if Randall gets the grant, we are going to do LG bifacials on a parking structure at their corporate offices in Moapa, which will, again, save the member-owned customers of Overton Power. Right now, Overton buys all of their electricity wholesale on the market. They don't own any generation. So this power plant, the first 33 kilowatts that's up and running, is the first member-owned generation they've ever had. And it was 100% paid for through the grant. If they are able to successfully carry out the plan, that phase 1, there'll be 3 more phases. So it'll be over 100 megawatts of, over 100 kilowatts of ground mount inside the substation. You can actually see it. If you drive past the substation, you can see it up through the fence.
Now, you guys don't, your company specifically doesn't do anything to prevent islanding for NV energy protection. That would be up to them.
Do you mean, will the system shut off if the grid goes down?
Is there any protection for the NV energy workers should my neighborhood go down?
Oh, okay. All residential solar systems are required to have rapid shutdown. That's part of National Electrical Code. And the inverters that we use, those N-phase microinverters, have built-in rapid shutdown. Yes, we're fully compliant with islanding.
Okay.
Now, if you wanted to have power when the grid goes down, yes, that can happen. It requires batteries. Batteries are not cheap. But
I'm
yes,
not doing batteries. They're too dangerous right now. Believe me, I have no more
They
about the
can
battery
be.
technology than you, I'm sure.
They can be.
It's just scary for what they're putting in these homes.
Coming later this year, though, is Enphase is going to release an IQ8 microinverter. That will be the first of its kind that will allow, if the grid goes down, it will allow the solar to continue to produce electricity, but not export. So it will island the system even without batteries. And the way it handles it is if the system's producing more than the loads in the house, it can selectively shut off the micros, 1, 2, 6, 8, to keep the generation on the roof in balance with the load demand in the house, and it won't export until the grid comes back up. So they keep telling us that's coming. Right now, we're being told Q3, Q4 of this year, but with the semiconductor shortages, it's probably going to push into 2022.
Yeah. Oh, you're probably looking further than that.
Maybe.
We're not
It
picking
all
up
kind
chips
of-
anytime soon.
Yeah, it kind of depends. That's putting a damper on all of the inverter makers because they need chips too.
Would you watch the news last night for Ford? They're just storing all these trucks everywhere around the city because they don't have the chips for them.
I
You know,
didn't hear that, but I'm
they've
not
not been able to stop
surprised.
production, obviously, because of the cost of that, but they can't operate them. So they're just storing them, all these lots, or, renting out stadium lots and these big parking lots and all these brand new trucks because they don't have chips for them.
Isn't that nuts?
And it's going to continue and
Yeah.
expand out farther and farther because when they interviewed Intel on 60 Minutes, they were like 2 years behind
Mm-hmm.
and everything, both because of COVID and, they weren't anticipating this, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting.
It will be. It'll